everybody, welcome to the Miss Martian bodysuit tutorial. Before we get started, I do want to say that this suit does require some sewing skills as well as some basic patterning and modification skills, so keep that in mind before you start. For this suit, I used the Yaya Han stretch pleather fabric in red and black, and for the cape I used a blue spandex lycra. You can also use regular spandex as well for the suit, just make sure that your fabric is a 4-way stretch. The first part will be making the actual bodysuit. You will need a bodysuit pattern, and this is where it gets a little difficult because all of the commercial patterns I have found are front seam patterns, and this is where the seam goes down the center of your chest and through the crotch, and Miss Martian has her X through the center of her chest, so you really need a side seam bodysuit pattern. A few options you will have is you can draft your own side seam bodysuit pattern from an existing front seam pattern. This is what I did. Basically, you lay your pattern out, make a suit from it, and then take that suit, cut it in half down the sides, trace it on another piece of fabric, cut that, and then do a lot of tailoring and sewing and fitting. It does require some extra fabric and a lot of patience, but it is possible. If you do go with this method, you will also need to add a zipper to the back of the suit so you can actually wear it. You can use a front seam pattern to help you with this part. If that sounds a little too intense for you, then you can make two separate pieces for the suit. You can take a leggings pattern to make the bottom half, and then take a long sleeve leotard top pattern to make the top half. Just make sure that both of the patterns you use are for knits and stretch fabrics. Once you have your patterns figured out, you are going to trace them to your suit. For the side seam pattern, you're just going to fold your fabric in half, right sides together, and on the fold you will place your pattern and cut out one piece. Then you will do the same for the back piece. Next, you will take both pieces and pin them right sides together. Then you will sew them together using a baste stitch. Make sure not to sew close the holes for the shoulders, neck, and feet. Once sewn, you will want to put on the suit and make sure it fits. If you are happy with your fit, then you will want to take a white piece of chalk and mark where the X is going to go on the front of your suit. After that, you will seam rip your suit apart and get ready to sew the X on. To pattern the X, I just took a piece of newspaper and laid the bodysuit over it. I then traced the bodysuit onto the newspaper. Next, I folded the newspaper in half and drew the X along the boundaries of the bodysuit. Just make sure that your X is even on all ends. Also, don't forget to draw the line for the belt part that goes across your hips. You will then take your newspaper pattern, lay it along the red pleather, trace it, and cut it out. Once you have your red X cut out, you are going to want to add it to the front piece of your bodysuit. This part can be a little tedious because this fabric likes to roll in on itself, and I have found the best method of dealing with it is Wonder Tape. Wonder Tape is just a double-sided tape that you put on both sides of the fabric, and it is washable. It does not require any heat or extra steps, just peel it and tape it. You can sew through it and it won't gum up your needle either. You will then want to sew your red X to your bodysuit using red thread and a zigzag stitch with a short width and length. This will give it a really nice embroidered looking edge. You can also go another route and actually cut the suit up into pieces and sew the X to the different pieces right sides together and then turn it right side out. It's a little bit more complicated, so I kind of cheated and took the applique route. Once you have your X sewn on, you are going to want to pin the back of the suit and the front of the suit right sides together and sew them. Don't forget to use a zigzag stitch since this is a stretch fabric, or you can also serge the edges. Next, we will work on the sleeves, which you will use your bodysuit pattern to cut out. The wrist of Miss Martian's sleeve has an odd trapezoid shape, so make sure you add a couple extra inches to your pattern so you can cut that shape along the edge of your wrist. You will then want to sew the edge of the sleeve right sides together, stopping about 8 inches before the wrist so you can add the red detail. The red trim of Miss Martian's wrist and neck are probably the most tedious parts of this costume. This explanation gets a little confusing, so make sure to pay attention to what I'm doing in the video to help you out. You will take your red fabric and fold it right sides together. You will then take the top edge of the sleeve and line it up against the folded edge of the red fabric. You will then trace the two side edges of the sleeve onto the red fabric as well. Once you have your main outline drawn, you will want to draw another line parallel to that outline to get your final shape. You will then pin the red fabric together and cut out a square, leaving plenty of excess for seam allowance, as you can see in the video. You are now going to sew together the two outer edges that line up with the fold. Once that is done, you should have a shape that's kind of like a shell. You will have one side of the piece that is open and one side of the piece that is closed. You will line up the closed edge of the shape to the edge of the sleeve. I did this using Wonder Tape as well, since it also likes to fold in on itself. You will then sew along the edge of your trim using a zigzag stitch with a short width and length, just like you did for your X shape on the suit. Repeat this process for the other sleeve, and then you can sew the last 8 inches that you left open on your sleeves together. You can then take your sleeves and cut off the excess seam allowance, or you can serge them like I did, but this is not necessary. I did not get a chance to record myself making the collar due to con crunch, but I used the exact same method for the trim on the collar as I did on the sleeve. Once you have the trim added to your collar, you can then add the collar to your suit, and this is the part where I added the zipper. The final part will be adding your sleeves to your suit. You will just pin them right sides together to the shoulder holes and sew them with a zigzag stitch. You can also serge it if you want, but it is not necessary. Once your suit is completely sewn, make sure you clip off all extra threads and serge the edges if you prefer. I did not get a lot of footage of me making the cape, but there are a ton of cape patterns out there you can use for this part. I decided to draft my own, and it's fairly easy if you would like to. You can just drape your fabric over a dress form or yourself and cut out the shape that you like for the cape. For the hood, you can just take a hoodie and turn it inside out and then trace the shape of that hood along 2 pieces of fabric right side together. Then sew them together, matching the seams on the hoodie. To finish the edges, you can either do a rolled hem, or you can just leave them raw. Since it is spandex, it will not fray. If you have a serger, I like to serge the edge and then fold that over and sew another line along that to make a hem. Your final step will be attaching the hood to the cape, where you will just put them right sides together at the neckline and sew them with a zigzag stitch or a serge. You should now have a completed cape and suit for your Miss Martian. If you would like to know how I do my Miss Martian body paint, I have a tutorial for that where I talk about PAX and Mayron Paradise paints that I use for my face and body. I also have a lot of other con vlogs where you can see Miss Martian in action. Be sure to check them out and hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay metal.